Welcome to linking to an external data block. In this video you will learn more about linking to another blend file. We'll be linking to an object data block, understand that there is a data block hierarchy and how that impacts your linking, and how to keep an eye out for when you might lose data. That's quite important because it can end up being very frustrating. You're not going to lose it as in it disappears off your hard drive, but you could lose it in your new blend file, the one you're linking to. So let's have a look at this data block hierarchy, and in front of us we have the outliner that you would see if you just opened up a typical default blend file, the one with the basic cube in it and a camera and a lamp in the scene. Now you can see this is a great example of a hierarchy, with the scene having render layers world, the camera object, the cube mesh object and the lamp object. Now beneath each one of those three we also have more details, each of which is a data block. So the camera will contain the camera properties beneath it, and the lamp would contain the lamp properties beneath it. And looking at the cube, there's a data block which holds the mesh information, which is the grayed out triangle. We've got the material information, that's another data block, and then beneath that there's a texture information that's applied to that material. And the important thing here is if we import, let's say, the mesh object, the cube object, we will automatically get the data, the material and the texture straight away. Now if we just imported the material, we would get that and the texture applied to that material. If we only imported the texture, then we'd only get that. So if we decide to import something that's got a hierarchy beneath it, that beneath hierarchy will also come through. That's important so you don't either flood your scene with something or miss something. So let's go have a look now at where we might accidentally start losing information. And to do that, we're going to have to hop on over into Blender. Okay, so back over in Blender, I've got my test room that we've been working on. It's looking pretty good so far. And I've got this whopping great big hierarchy here. So let's go ahead and just experience what happens when, or potentially, where we might lose information. Now, hopefully this won't happen to you, but it is always possible. So I'd like you to go to File, go down to Link, and I'm in, where am I in at the moment? I'm in my Mayan pyramid scene. That's not going to be any good. So I'm going to go to my game asset pack, and I'm going to go actually up a level and see the other projects that I've worked on, and go ahead and find something. I'm going to go back one to the Fluffy Bunny because I know I played with materials in there. I'm going to go to fluffybunny.blend, open that up. I'm going to go into material, and I've got all of these materials that I made. And let's say that I wanted to, I really like the colour of the soil, I don't know, but I'm going to pick the soil as the material and link it. It does mean that if I change that material over on the Fluffy Bunny, it will automatically be applied here as well. So that's important to know that link exists. But at the moment, this material is not applied to anything. So it's going to have that 0 next to it in the data block. So if I go ahead and select this doorway, for instance, and then go to the materials property, now there aren't any materials assigned to it at the moment. If I click this drop down, I can see that I've got an L, and the L means that it's a linked, in this case a linked data block, a linked material, and it's got a 0 next to it, which means it's got no users. That does mean that if I go ahead and save this file right now and exit without applying that to anything or giving it a fake user, that will result in it disappearing from this scene. So you can't just go and grab a load of materials from another blend file without giving them a fake user or assigning them to an object. Otherwise, the next time you open up your scene, they would have vanished. And that goes for several other things as well. The mesh data. So if we hop over here to the data block, in this here, if we were to import, well, let's do it. Let's go and go File, Link, and let's go up a level. And where is our mesh? So we've got mesh here, we've got all of these data blocks here. I'm going to go for leaves and link from library. And again, if I use this drop down here, we see that it's linked, it's got no users, and it's called leaves. So we've got an inherent problem here that if we don't apply it straight away to something, there's a good chance we will accidentally lose it if we left this blend file. Of course, we can give it a fake user or assign it to something. Now that doesn't happen if you go and do an object, because that actually brings it into the scene fully. So if we go and give that a go now, and go link, and this time I am going to go back to my game assets pack, go to meshes, and under here I'm going to pick the door again. So we're going to go to door, going to go to the object, and here we go, SM, wall door, and then the size of it, link from library, and it looks like it's there. Now I'm not going to be able to move it, and we'll go to more detail about that at the moment, but it's now in my scene. I'm just going to move it to a different layer. I'm going to press M here and just move it to, I like calling that sub-layer 1. I don't know which layer actually applies to, but I'm going to put it on the layer beneath, just so I can move it out of the way quickly. Okay, so now that I've done that, if we go and have a look in the object area, we will see, oh, we've got a lot in here at the moment. We're going to have the linked SM wall door, and it's got the L next to it to make sure we know that it is linked. There's no 0 there, it's in the scene. If we go to the data properties here, and we drop down here, we can see it says Albert. Okay, it's not named properly in this case. I will need to go back to the original file and sort that out, amongst a few other things I've got planned to do here. But it's there, and it has an assigned user because the object is a real object, it exists in our scene. The mesh data, the materials and the textures, etc. are just properties that can be applied to an object. So if they don't have a user, they're going to disappear if they haven't been used or given a fake user. Okay guys, now I've got a small challenge for you. I would like you to link your building blocks. Now do check your pieces for any issues. They're probably going to be naming ones if anything. Fix and make any new pieces as necessary. Link the major pieces into your scene and store them on a separate layer. Remember to name the layer appropriately. Now don't worry about moving them for the moment. When you bring them in as a linked object, they will be highlighted blue, and you won't be able to do anything with them in terms of transforming them. So you won't be able to move them, scale them, or rotate them. So pause the video now and give that a go. Okay guys, welcome back. Let's go link our building blocks over in Blender. Right, before we hop into Blender, I just want to show you what I've done in the background so you guys are not shell-shocked when it changes from a simple room to more of a church style. I've gone and repeated these sort of basic building blocks. I've tucked my basic building blocks away in a basic room folder underneath the meshes, and I've gone for some church style assets. So let's have a more detailed look. I've got a floor of 3 different sizes, and I've done that for the simple reason that even though I can scale my objects, when a texture is applied to that, it will scale the texture as well. So I want as much flexibility as possible, especially with the floor, because I want large pieces and I might want small pieces to flesh out little alcoves or corner pieces. I've also made a church corner, which is very useful. It's 1 Blender unit by 1 Blender unit by 4 Blender units high. All of these are now 4 high because it's a church, it's a lot bigger in structure. I've got a front door that I've made. The vault, now that was one of the most challenging ones to make. But it's perfectly possible using all the skills we've got already. Have a quick look at that in a moment. And a plain old wall, which was 4x4 by 0.2. That's the other change I've made. I made the thickness 0.2. So when I'm moving in tenths of a Blender unit, I can actually match it up. And the church window, so there's an archway window in there as well. So let's just have a quick look at the vault and explain how this was put together, because it was more of a challenge than the simple building blocks that we've got. Now, I realised that in my designer, they're about 8 Blender units apart where the pillars are going to go that come up to this vault. That I had to look up what the vault was called. It's the ceiling bit that looks like this in a church. Okay, so I produced an archway, just a series of edges joined together to make an arch, and I mirrored that around one of the axes. I then duplicated that around the other way, but keeping the mirror modifier actually applied. Now, when I performed a Boolean operation to produce a union between the two, I ended up with a hole just where I wanted it. So I then used that, mirrored it again, rotated it again, and there we go. I ended up with this object, which then I used the solidify modifier, which I think is still applied. Yes, it is. So it's still active, it's not applied yet, just in case I need to change the thickness. So I've made it then solid, so it was just very thin before and would cause some artifacts when rendering. So that's looking pretty good now. And so I now need to append all of these into the scene. I'm also going to turn on smooth shading to make that look a bit prettier. Excellent. So let's go. I don't need to do anything there. I'm going to create a new Blender file and just append them all in, because all of my old assets, well, it's just going to be an absolute pain to try and use them again in any way whatsoever. So let's go ahead. I'm going to use the shortcut keys Control, Alt and O. Now I need to go to my assets folder, meshes, and literally go through and add all of these to the scene. Okay, so the final piece is now coming in, the church window. We'll select the object and bring that into our scene. So we've got everything there, and I'm going to move it to a working layer. So let's select all of those. I don't want to select the camera or the other bits, the lamp itself. So I'm going to select them in the outliner instead, because that's a bit easier in this case since they're on top of one another. I've got all of those selected. I'm going to move them to this layer here. I'm going to go into my layers, into my layer management, and just make sure that that is named. In fact, I'm just going to put them on layer 2. That would make far more sense here. So move to layer 2, and then if necessary I can move them later. So let's give that a name, and let's call that parts layer. Brilliant. So the final thing here to do is, because I've created a new file, I'm going to save as. I'm going to come out, into the scenes using our building blocks test room. Well, now I've moved my files, that's actually dead, so I can delete that. Because I've done this hierarchy here, where in the meshes where I've moved them to basic room, it's broken a lot of the links. So let's just remember that for future. So it's okay because it's a test scene. So I'm going to go into scenes and I'm going to call it Gothic Church. Excellent. The final thing to do is go to my source tree. Have I got everything in here? Just check and see what assets have changed. Meshes. Yep, it's got all of my data there ready to go, so I just need to make a commit message. I've updated my README file, so I know what it's all about. I'm going to commit, and this is the 14th lecture, so I'm going to call it Game Asset Pack 14, linking to an external data block. I'm going to make sure that I've staged those, which I have done, and click commit. Brilliant. How did you guys get on? Please share your work in the discussions, and I will see you guys in the next lecture.